Hey everyone, welcome to Hands On Books. I'm going on a trip to Brazil tomorrow, so I'm at my favorite part of packing, which is deciding which books I want to take with me. I always end up having a backpack full of books and little else when I go on trips, and I like trying to pick like the perfect mix of books to bring to scratch any itch. So I wanted to open a bunch of packages as fast as I could to see if I catch anything or if I open anything that catches my interest that I might want to bring with me. But so far, I'm planning on bringing at least some of these books. Kim, The Languages of Pow by Jack Vance. Gurdjieff's Meetings with Remarkable Men. I read about half of this maybe 2 or 3 Brazil trips ago. And I kind of like the idea of picking it up again in the same place after so many years. A collection of short stories by Machado de Assis. Crooked Plow by Itamar Vieira Jr. Another Brazilian book that one of my cousins gave me. And Brazilian Sketches by Rudyard Kipling. This is a really cool one that I can't wait to read more of. I read the very beginning and it was amazing. But this book's from 1940 and it smells great. Yeah, this is a good one. I'll read the very beginning of this. The Journey Out. Once, in a child's dream, I wandered into a fifth quarter of the world and found everything different from all previous knowledge, as only children or old folk desire it to be. Now the dream has come true. The South American boats are a world to themselves, more intimate and specialized than any other. Inquiries begin to be answered in Portuguese or Spanish while we lie at the Southampton docks. The ship's notices stand in both tongues, and the passengers do not in the least concern themselves with anything or anybody, or any motive or policy that, till then, one had held to be important. Amazing sentence. Before our steamer began to shift the sun, all known centers of gravity had shifted, and were spinning on new bearings. One companion of the way drew, by birth of inheritance, from the Falkland Islands, and knew that very woman who sent in word to Sturdy's people that the enemy were coming down, not guessing that our ships were at hand. He was used to circulate by boat among the firths and fjords of the islands, and by horse, saddlebags, of course, there's no way of carrying a trunk, inland across rivers of stone and moors where no trees grow, and men fence in the wild seabirds at nesting time that they may better manure the pastures. This had been his father's life before him, and he loved it more than all his other great possessions. Other companions inhabited beyond the limits of imagination, among the snows and fires of the Cordilleras, or in sweating forest concessions northward, where unknown rivers out of the hearts of unknown forests rise and drown unknown tribes whose bodies presently arrive, face down, at the frontiers of civilization. There were cattlemen owning flat and stoneless land by the 100 square league, through which railways run forever and ever without bend or rise or culvert to them. Their wives and daughters and the families of the coffee princes had, by their look, been in the Rue de la Paix till the last moment. There were men, also, with English and Irish names, as southern as their Argentine wives, and their electrically quick children who used 3 languages at once in their play and went to bed when they felt sleepy, but not before. As the blessed warmth brought back all the rules of right living, the thin kit, the long drink, and the disregard of what manufactured clocks say up north, men talked. Every man felt it his duty to point out that the place one was going to was not the place one ought to see, at any rate, not at first. There were Inca cities and causeways, for instance, 15,000 feet up in the air, with copper mines, or was it gold-stuffed glacial deposits, just beneath them, a mere picnic to reach. But, said another, not to be compared with 200 solid miles of high-grade Herefords, all going to be turned into beef tea, and all accessible by luxurious Pullmans. Or did one desire cities as progressive as Birmingham, with opera and town halls, and race courses of limitless cost and size? Or still green worlds of coffee, or whispering, dark coconut plantations, where old houses were hidden beside old, old chapels, and one could catch a breath of what life used to be in the days of the superb Brazilian Empire? Or suburban railways that corkscrewed themselves up the faces of 3,000-foot mountains, or transcontinentals that rumbled nightly over the Andes, and fed you rather decently en route. These things, and heaps more, were to be played with, and the men of the cattle, coffee, shipping, oil, rail, and all the other interests said, and meant it, that they would give one a good time. But time was quite good enough as it came up day after day with the ripening warmth, under escort of squadrons of flying fish, always rounding to across our steady bows. The Portuguese and Spanish immigrants taken in at Vigo and Lisbon lay out on the forecastle, and lived in the open after their easy custom. The life that they were going to, men told me, would be the same as that they had left, with the difference that in the south they could become as rich as their talents justified. They had no difficulties to overcome. An Italian could pick up working Portuguese in a fortnight. Climate, custom, and language had apportioned those southern countries for the Latin. There were Basques also, and that was a stock that did well. The present ruler of one of the great southern states was, for example, pure Basque. And immigrants were needed. Did I realize? Here they spouted figures of square mileage and population there too, showing how many millions could be thrown into the illimitable South before it ceased to echo. Some of my informants used South specifically, because they said the North means the tropics, where men grow lazy, whereas the businesslike South is swept by polar breezes and bucked up by frosty winters. To which the North replied in effect, "Don't you wish you were like us? What would you give to be the Paris of the South?" And so on. One got at these things easily as the days grew warmer, and more Spanish and Portuguese lingua franca crept into the talk, and the children's voices lifted themselves along the docks. "Eduardo, ahora sé. Do look out, you, petit imbecile." Or, when it was necessary to suppress Eduardo further, in Portuguese, "Oh, go away and plant potatoes." But my business was the pursuit of the beautiful, and beyond a desire to hang architects, I had never taken interest in municipal buildings. The purple-blue seas pushed under and crowded back behind the ship. The sun rises without a shiver to them, when the day rules at once, full-born, and the instant down-dive of night over the very head of the sunset had been forgotten too long for the soul's health. One had to catch up with these. Then, one early morn, our ship stopped, and by consequence all the little draughts and breezes that run up and down are stopped too, and heat, the genuine heat of lands that have not weather, beat friendlily on the back. Friendlily, you don't see that very often. It was Pernambuco, opening another jeweled day, with boats alongside where men sold golden and pink mangoes, and green parakeets, every patch and flash of color definite as enamel work. The whole backed by the concrete of new piers, oil tanks, and warehouses. Behind these, low coast with veritable palms and bananas, quite unchanged since last seen, and hints of villas on a wooded cape that ran out into the turquoise. Overside, dim shapes of shovel-nosed sharks who are respectable harbor scavengers and need not be fished for. And, as one stared, there unrolled itself a length of well-known film, a shore-boat with a man in white kit that had been often washed. He came aboard and introduced himself to a very young man in quite new London whites, with the creases still down the front of the trousers, who turned to his companions and bade them farewell. It was just a Pernambuco bank taking over a new clerk. When the pair were gone, the young figure looking all ways at once, and I had finished estimating the number of shore boats of different makes, in different ports, at that hour, with allowance for change of time, convoying just the same suit of whites, I asked a man, "What do you think he'll make of it?" "He'll like it no end, and he'll talk about his first commission at Pernam as long as he lives. They all do. I know I did. It's a dear little place." Which may be good news to some mother, the far side of the sea. Kipling's just amazing. It's really difficult to stop reading him, but I want to open some books, so I got 3 in this one. First up, Forever Peace by Joe Haldeman. This is the sequel to Haldeman's Forever War, which is a great science fiction book, and I knew it had a sequel, but I didn't realize until I was looking at some Nebula award list the other day that its sequel also won Nebula and Hugo Award. So I'm just gonna read the first page, and that's it, and the back. 2043 A.D. The Ngumi War rages, fought by soldier boys, remote control war machines run by soldiers hundreds of miles away. Julian Class is one of these soldiers, and for him, war is indeed hell. The psychological strain of being jacked into his soldier boy and the genocidal results are becoming too much to bear. Now he and his lover, Dr. Amelia Harding, have made a terrifying scientific discovery that could literally put the universe back to square one. For Julian, however, the discovery isn't terrifying, it's tempting. Oh, here it says, though not a sequel to his classic The Forever War. Haldeman's new novel rivals it for emotional power. Interesting. It's just confusingly similarly named. And Forever War is like very military minded because he was in Vietnam, so he brings actual combat experience to the action of his novels. So I love Forever War. I thought this was a sequel, but it's not. Let's read the first page. It was not quite completely dark. Thin blue moonlight threading down through the canopy of leaves, and it was never completely quiet. A thick twig popped, the noise muffled under a heavy mass. A male howler monkey came out of his drowse and looked down. Something moved down there, black on black. He filled his lungs to challenge it. There was a sound like a piece of newspaper being torn. The monkey's midsection disappeared in a dark spray of blood and shredded organs. The body fell heavily through the branches in two halves. Would you lay off the goddamn monkeys? Shut up. This place is an ecological reserve. My watch. Shut up. Target practice. Black on black, it paused, then slipped through the jungle like a heavy, silent reptile. A man could be standing 2 yards away and not see it. In infrared, it wasn't there. Radar would slither off its skin. It smelled human flesh and stopped. The prey, maybe 30 meters upwind. A male, rank with old sweat, garlic on his breath. The smell of gun oil and smokeless powder, residue. It tested the direction of the wind and backtracked, circled around. The man would be watching the path, so come in from the woods. All right, next is Unabridged Ramayana, translated by R.K. Narayan. The Ramayana is quite simply the greatest of Indian epics, and one of the world's supreme masterpieces of storytelling. Almost every individual living in India, writes R.K. Narayan, in the introduction of this new interpretation, is aware of the story of the Ramayana. Everyone of whatever age, outlook, education, or station in life knows the essential parts of the epic and adores the main figures in it, Rama and Sita. Every child is told the story at bedtime. The Ramayana pervades our cultural life. Although the Sanskrit original was composed by Valmiki, probably around the 4th century BC, poets have produced countless variant versions in different languages. Here, drawing his inspiration from the work of an 11th century Tamil poet called Kamban, Narayan has used the talents of a master novelist to recreate the excitement and joy he has found in the original. It can be enjoyed and appreciated, he suggests, for its psychological insight, its spiritual depth, and its practical wisdom, or just as a thrilling tale of abduction, battle, and courtship played out in a universe thronged with heroes, deities, and demons. I love these old penguin books in general. Let's read the very first page of this version. Chapter 1, Rama's Initiation. The new assembly hall, Dasaratha's latest pride, was crowded all day with visiting dignitaries, royal emissaries, and citizens coming in with representations or appeals for justice. The king was always accessible, and fulfilled his duties as the ruler of Kosala without grudging the hours spent in public service. On a certain afternoon, messengers at the gate came running in to announce Sage Viswamitra. When the message was relayed to the king, he got up and hurried forward to receive the visitor. Viswamitra, once a king, a conqueror, and a dreaded name until he renounced his kingly role and chose to become a sage, which he accomplished through severe austerities, combined in himself the sage's eminence and the king's authority, and was quick-tempered and positive. Dasaratha led him to a proper seat and said, "This is a day of glory for us. Your gracious presence is most welcome. You must have come from afar. Would you first rest?" "No need," the sage replied simply. He had complete mastery over his bodily needs through inner discipline and austerities, and was above the effects of heat, cold, hunger, fatigue, and even decrepitude. The king later asked politely, "Is there anything I can do?" Viswamitra looked steadily at the king and answered, "Yes. I am here to ask you a favor. I wish to perform, before the next full moon, at Yagna at Siddhasrama. Doubtless you know where it is." All right, let's keep going. The Imitation of Christ by Thomas A. Kempis. I can't remember exactly what this is. William Creasy's version of The Imitation of Christ is more than a new translation of a timeless work. It's a recreation of a 560-year-old classic that infuses it with life and meaning for contemporary readers. Working from the 1441 autograph manuscript, Creasy succeeds in creating a dramatically different interpretation of the Imitation by working through its historical, cultural, and linguistic contexts. For Creasy, Thomas A. Kempis offers profound insights into a person's relationship with God, insights that only deepen when they accommodate a post-Vatican II understanding of what he has to say. He accomplishes this by using a technique called reader response theory, bringing forward the 15th century reader's response to such themes in the work as contempt for the world, the spirit versus the flesh, friendship, and sin, to effectively harmonize them with the 20th century understanding. Yet Creasy's is a faithful translation, even to the point of replicating rhetorical devices, stylistic patterns, and figures of speech used by Thomas A. Kempis. It provides the reader the opportunity to discover the book praised by Johnson, Carlyle, and Eliot, and translated by Ignatius Loyola, the most widely published book after the Bible, a book that has appeared in over 600 editions and guided millions on their journey to God, a book that offers new insight and deeper understanding with each reading. Cool. Read the first page. Chapter 1. Of the Imitation of Christ. "Anyone who follows me shall not walk in the darkness, says the Lord." These are the words of Christ, and by them we are reminded that we must imitate his life and his ways if we are to be truly enlightened and set free from the darkness of our own hearts. Let it be the most important thing we do, then, to reflect on the life of Jesus Christ. Christ's teaching surpasses all the teachings of the saints, and the person who has his spirit will find hidden nourishment in his words. Yet many people, even after hearing Scripture read so often, lack a deep longing for it, for they do not have the Spirit of Christ. Anyone who wishes to understand Christ's words and to savor them fully should strive to become like him in every way. What good does it do, then, to debate about the Trinity, if by a lack of humility you are displeasing to the Trinity? In truth, lofty words do not make a person holy and just, but a virtuous life makes one dear to God. I would much rather feel profound sorrow for my sins than be able to define the theological term for it. It's an interesting sentence. I would much rather feel profound sorrow for my sins than be able to define the theological term for it. If you knew the whole Bible by heart and the sayings of all the philosophers, what good would it all be without God's love and grace? Vanity of vanities, and all is vanity, except to love God and to serve only him. This is the highest wisdom, to see the world as it truly is, fallen and fleeting, to love the world not for its own sake, but for God's, and to direct all your effort toward achieving the kingdom of heaven. So, it is vanity to seek material wealth that cannot last and to place your trust in it. It is also vanity to seek recognition and status. It is vanity to chase after what the world says you should want and to long for those things you should not have, things that you will pay a high price for later on if you get them. It is vanity to wish for a long life and to care little about a good life. It is vanity to focus only on your present life and not to look ahead to your future life. It is vanity to live for the joys of the moment and not to seek eagerly the lasting joys that await you. Often remember that saying, "The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor is the ear filled with hearing." Make every effort, then, to shift your affections from the things that you can see to the things you cannot see. For people who live in the world on its terms instead of on God's stain their conscience and lose God's grace. Interesting. Next. The Wall by John Lanchester. I saw online that this book might be similar to Doggerland, which I really liked, by Ben Smith. Ravaged by the change, an island nation in a time very like our own has built the Wall, an enormous concrete barrier around its entire coastline. Joseph Kavanaugh, a new defender, has one task: to protect his section of the wall from the others, the desperate souls who are trapped amid the rising seas outside and are a constant threat. Failure will result in death, or a fate perhaps worse, being put to sea and made an other himself. Beset by cold, loneliness, and fear, Kavanaugh tries to fulfill his duties to his demanding captain and sergeant, even as he grows closer to his fellow defenders. A dark part of him wonders whether it would be interesting if something did happen, if they came, if he had to fight for his life. All right, let's check out the first page. It's cold on the wall. That's the first thing everybody tells you, and the first thing you notice when you're sent there. And it's the thing you think about all the time you're on it. And it's the thing you remember when you're not there anymore. It's cold on the wall. You look for metaphors. It's cold as slate, as diamond, as the moon. Cold as charity. That's a good one. But you soon realize that the thing about the cold is that it isn't a metaphor. It isn't like anything else. It's nothing but a physical fact. This kind of cold, anyway. Cold is cold is cold. That's the first thing that hits you. It isn't like other cold. This is a cold that is all about the place, like a permanent physical attribute of the location. The cold is one of its fundamental properties. It's intrinsic, so it hits you as a package. The first time you go to the wall, on the first day of your tour, you know that you are there for 2 years. You know that it's basically the same everywhere, as far as the geography goes, but that everything depends on what the people you will be serving with are like. You know that there's nothing you can do about that. It is frightening, but also in its way a little bit freeing. No choice. Everything about the wall means you have no choice. Next, we've got Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel, or Mandel. And I've seen this book a million times at stores, and I've finally just decided to get it. Kirsten Raymond will never forget the night Arthur Leander, the famous Hollywood actor, had a huge heart attack on stage during a production of King Lear. That was also the night when a devastating flu epidemic arrived in the city, and within weeks, civilization as we know it came to an end. 20 years later, Kirsten moves between the settlements of the altered world with a small troupe of actors and musicians. I love that. They call themselves the Traveling Symphony, and they have dedicated themselves to keeping the remnants of art and humanity alive. But when they arrive in St. Deborah by the water, they encounter a violent prophet who will threaten the tiny band's existence, and as the story takes off, moving back and forth in time, and vividly depicting life before and after the pandemic, the strange twist of fate that connects them all will be revealed. First page. The king stood in a pool of blue light, unmoored. This was Act 4 of King Lear, a winter night at the Elgin Theatre in Toronto. Earlier in the evening, 3 little girls had played a clapping game on stage as the audience entered, childhood versions of Lear's daughters, and now they'd returned as hallucinations in the mad scene. The king stumbled and reached for them as they flitted here and there in the shadows. His name was Arthur Leander. He was 51 years old, and there were flowers in his hair. Great sentence. "Dost thou know me?" the actor playing Gloucester asked. "I remember thine eyes well enough," Arthur said, distracted by the child version of Cordelia, and this was when it happened. There was a change in his face. He stumbled. He reached for a column but misjudged the distance and struck it hard with the side of his hand. "Down from the waist they are centaurs," he said, and not only was this the wrong line, but the delivery was wheezy, his voice barely audible. He cradled his hand to his chest like a broken bird. The actor portraying Edward was watching him closely. It was still possible at that moment that Arthur was acting, but in the first row of the orchestra section, a man was rising from his seat. He'd been training to be a paramedic. The man's girlfriend tugged at his sleeve, hissed, "Jeevan, what are you doing?" And Jeevan himself wasn't sure at first, the rows behind him murmuring for him to sit. An usher was moving toward him. Snow began to fall over the stage. "The wren goes to it," Arthur whispered, and Jeevan, who knew the play very well, realized that the actor had skipped back 12 lines. The wren... "Sir," the usher said, "would you please—" But Arthur Leander was running out of time. He swayed, his eyes unfocused, and it was obvious to Jeevan that he wasn't Lear anymore. Jeevan pushed the usher aside and made a dash for the steps leading up to the stage, but a second usher was jogging down the aisle, which forced Jeevan to throw himself at the stage without the benefit of stairs. It was higher than he'd thought, and he had to kick the first usher, who'd grasped hold of his sleeve. The snow was plastic, Jeevan noted peripherally, little bits of translucent plastic, clinging to his jacket and brushing against his skin. Edgar and Gloucester were distracted by the commotion, neither of them looking at Arthur, who was leaning on a plywood column, staring vacantly. There were shouts from backstage, 2 shadows approaching quickly, but Jeevan had reached Arthur by now, and he caught the actor as he lost consciousness, eased him gently to the floor. The snow was falling fast around them, shimmering in blue-white light. Arthur wasn't breathing. The 2 shadows, security men, had stopped a few paces away, presumably catching on by now that Jeevan wasn't a deranged fan. The audience was a clamor of voices, flashes from cell phone cameras, indistinct exclamations in the dark. I like that, and I just like the idea of a traveling troupe in a post-apocalyptic sort of setting. That's a really engaging idea. So we've got Gypsy by Carter Scholz. Since his debut in Terry Carr's legendary Ace specials of the 1980s, Carter Scholz has occupied an enviable, if demanding, position on the cutting edge of modern speculative literature, vulgarly called SF. Proudly debuting in this volume, Gypsy is his first major work since his 2002 nuclear thriller Radiance. An interstellar adventure grounded in the hard science of accurate physics and biology, Gypsy soars far beyond the heliosphere of conventional science fiction. Jettisoning the easy warp drives of fantasy and space opera, Scholz chronicles with chilling realism the epic voyage of a team of far-seeing scientists who crowdsource a secret starship and abandon the doomed Earth for the Alpha Centauri system, our nearest stellar neighbor and last desperate chance. Heartbreak and hope collide in this moving and visionary tale. Alright, let's check out the first page. Gypsy. The living being is only a species of the dead, and a very rare species. Nietzsche. When a long shot is all you have, you're a fool not to take it. Romani's saying. For Cheryl. Chapter 1. The launch of Earth's first starship went unremarked. The crew gave no interviews. No camera broadcast the hard light pulsing from its tail. To the plain eye, it might have been a common airplane. The media battened on multiple wars and catastrophes. The Arctic Ocean was open sea. Florida was underwater. Crises and opportunities intersected. World population was something over 10 billion. No one was really counting anymore. A few billion were stateless refugees. A few billion more were indentured or imprisoned. Oil reserves, declared as recently as 2010 to exceed 1 trillion barrels, proved to be an accounting gimmick. Gone by 2020. More difficult and expensive sources, tar sands in Canada and Venezuela, natural gas fracking, became primary, driving up atmospheric methane and the price of fresh water. The countries formerly known as the Third World stripped and sold their resources with more ruthless abandon than their mentors had. Great line. With the proceeds, they armed themselves. The U.S. was no longer the global hyperpower, but it went on behaving as if. Generations of outspending the rest of the world combined had made this its habit and brand. Arms merchant to expedient allies, former and future foes alike, starting or provoking conflicts more or less at need, its constant need being, as always, resources. Its waning might was built on a memory of those vast native reserves it had long since expropriated and depleted, and a sense of entitlement to more. These overseas conflicts were problematic and carried wildly unintended consequences. As the president of Venezuela put it just days before his assassination, "It's dangerous to go to war against your own asshole." The starship traveled out of our solar system at a steep angle to the ecliptic plane. It would pass no planets. It was soon gone, going south. That might be a fun one to bring. All right, one more. Christ and Oriental Ideals by Paramananda. I love this little book already. It's just got a nice feel and look to it. This purple on white. Swami Paramananda, a disciple of Swami Vivekananda, was one of the first Indian teachers to come to the United States. He founded the Boston Vedanta Center in 1909. Lecturer, author, poet, and most important of all, an illumined spiritual guide. Swami Paramananda was also an innovator in spiritual community living. In 1923, he founded Ananda Ashrama, La Crescenta, California, a unique community accommodating both men and women, monastics and householders, which is still flourishing today. Swami Paramananda passed away in 1940. Ananda Ashrama and the Vedanta Center of Cohasset, Massachusetts, where the Boston Center moved in 1952, continue under the guidance of Swami Paramananda's successor, Srimati Gayatri Devi of India. Or at least it did in 1968. All right, let's read the first page. Who is a Christian? Shall we say, then, that there were no Christians before Christ, and that there are no Christians outside of what we call Christendom? Augustine was wiser than that. He refers somewhere to that which has always been in the world from the beginning, and which, in these latter days, we have come to call Christian. So Augustine, the old church father and theologian, recognized that what we regarded as important and essential in Christianity was older than what had gone by that name. The ideal man is the man who loves, and the man who knows how to apply his love power and impetus in such a way as to help, save, transform, develop, and glorify mankind. And I think the man who embodies these three things is a Christian, whatever else he believes. Dr. Minot Savage. Pure Spirit. When the pure Spirit shines, who sees it? Few, yea, only a very few. For not many have the seeing eye. Many see the light of the sun, the moon, the far distant stars, and the light of the roadside lamp, but only the pure in heart with the eye of love can see the light that shineth from pure Spirit. Chapter 1. Value of Comparative Study. Our object in surveying the world of religion and making a comparative study of it is not in any way to prove the supremacy of one religion over another, but to find a sympathetic chord which may serve as a common synthesis for all. When the Great Parliament of Religions was convened in 1893 in connection with the Columbian Exposition held at Chicago, it met with no small opposition from the eminent dignitaries of the Orthodox churches, and even from prominent laymen. Some thought it was a sacrilege to admit there was any true religion other than Christianity. After some discussion and opposition, when this great ideal of bringing diversified religions together became an actual fact, even then many devout Christians candidly believed that it was going to prove once for all the supremacy of Christianity over all other existing faiths, but its effect was quite the contrary. It proved that noble ideas and ideals were not exclusive to any country or nation, but were present among all peoples of the earth. Cool. Yeah, like I said, I love this little book. Okay, that's enough. Not sure exactly what I'm going to be bringing to Brazil, but hopefully you were introduced to some books you never heard before. Maybe one interested you enough to go out and check it out. But until next time, happy reading.